Inside this episode, I want to talk to you about the Illuminati, the card game that tells the story of secret societies and the New World Order. It has been in the spotlight multiple times due to its alleged ability to predict future events, such as the attack on the Twin Towers, the Fukushima nuclear disaster, and even the coronavirus pandemic. The game's style and texts are deliberately exaggerated, often with a humorous and grotesque flavor. The underlying idea is akin to that of the literary works it draws inspiration from, yet over the years, an aura of suspicion has surrounded the game, almost menacing, due to the events it has been involved in. A particularly significant event in the history of Steve Jackson games occurred on March 1, 1990, when there was a real raid by agents of the USS, the United States Secret Service, at the offices in Austin, Texas. The accusation was that they had hired a dangerous hacker named Lloyd Blankenship, but known to most by the pseudonym The Mentor, and a member of the Legion of Doom, one of the most famous hacker groups in the world in the 1980s. Blankenship, already arrested and convicted in 1986 for hacking offenses, was a legend for writing, during his time in prison, the so-called Hacker Manifesto, the essay that outlines the fundamental principles of the ideology behind all the culture associated with these activities. During the investigation named Operation Sundevil, computers with their hard disks were seized, as well as company documents and a manual written by Blankenship, GURPS Cyberpunk, which the agents had indicated as a dangerous hacking manual. In reality, it was later discovered that this manual was nothing more than a supplement to a role-playing game called GURPS. The operation, despite being based on entirely unfounded accusations, caused serious financial damage to Jackson's company, which was at risk of bankruptcy. Even after a long legal battle that Jackson won against the US government, he received altered or missing documents and hard disks. This began to instill the idea that investigations into Steve Jackson's works were a sign of something extremely forbidden that the author had sensed and was trying to communicate through his games. These theories found various supporters in the subsequent decade. Illuminati is a card game created by the mind of Steve Jackson, a respected board game author known for futuristic war games like Ogre 1977 and Wizard 1978, published by Metagaming Concepts, where he worked at the time. After leaving the company due to disagreements related to the game The Fantasy Trip, for which he had lost creative control, the young Jackson founded Steve Jackson Games in 1980. Right from the start, the idea of Dave Martin, a young illustrator collaborating with Jackson, emerged within the fledgling publishing house to adapt the novels of the Illuminatus trilogy by Robert Anton Wilson and Robert Shea. The volumes tell, in satirical tones and a dystopian setting, the conflict between the Masonic-style secret society of the Illuminati, which secretly controls the planet, and the followers of the cult of Eris, goddess of chaos, also known as Discordianists. The adaptation operation proved to be much more complex than expected from the beginning. The acquisition costs of the rights to the work were quite prohibitive for Jackson's budget, and the difficulties of adapting such an intricate and complex story did not align with the needs of a board game. However, the idea of a title based on global conspiracy and the clandestine struggle for dominance of the planet persisted and became a key to the game's success. Illuminati was officially published in its basic version in July 1982. Essentially, it is a classic card game in which 2 to 8 players impersonate different organizations linked to Freemasonry, each with different objectives assigned to the Illuminati groups. Victory conditions range from annihilating rival groups to achieving a certain level of power, or simply accumulating a certain amount of megabucks, millions of dollars, representing the currency. Following its success, the game was expanded with 3 sets of expansions that added more cards, and in 1995, the version Illuminati New World Order was published, which adopted a different format with collectible cards to create decks for one-on-one battles. One of the most controversial cards in the deck is called Terrorist Nuke, depicting 2 bombed skyscrapers, an image that immediately brings to mind the September 11, 2001 World Trade Center attack, which has gone down in history as the Twin Towers attack. Surprising coincidence is also the Pentagon card, depicting an attack on the United States Department of Defense headquarters. Many conspiracy theorists have also associated the oil spill card with the environmental disaster of the Deepwater Horizon oil platform of British Petroleum, which began on April 20, 2010, with millions of barrels spilled into the Gulf of Mexico for days on end. But it doesn't end there. The combined disasters card is linked to the Fukushima nuclear power plant disaster on March 11, 2011, following a 9.0 Richter scale earthquake, which triggered a tsunami with waves as high as 10 meters. Both the earthquake and tsunami cards are part of environmental disasters that can be combined as desired by various secret societies. The association with Japan was drawn from the figure of the Ginza Wako Tower in Tokyo. The Jihad card, according to some, predicts all events related to ISIS and the rise of the Islamic State. Specifically, the truck bomb card can only refer to the attacks in Nice, Berlin, London, and Stockholm. Other cards are less directly associated with specific events, but reference secret practices widely denounced on the internet, such as the International Weather Organization card, which points to the control of Earth's climate, as well as the controversial theory of chemtrails, which is becoming increasingly relevant. Another truly interesting card is the NASA card. It depicts a film set arranged to stage a fake moon landing, presumably carried out by NASA, since the astronaut is waving the flag of the United States of America. If you recall, on July 24, 1969, Neil Armstrong, Michael Collins, and Buzz Aldrin returned to Earth after the historic space mission that made them the first men on the moon. Within a year, they all resigned from NASA. Neil Armstrong retired to live in the countryside. He stopped giving interviews and never attended any celebratory events for subsequent Apollo missions. Buzz Aldrin fell into a severe state of depression, leading him to become enslaved by alcohol and drugs. In an interview, he said, "They consider us heroes, but the moon destroyed us." In 2004, director Bart Sibrald made a documentary titled Astronauts Going Wild. He met Armstrong, a devout believer, and asked him to swear on the Bible that they had been to the moon, but Armstrong refused. Bart offered to donate $5,000 to charity in exchange for the oath, but once again, Armstrong refused and left. Aldrin is also a believer. Bart asked him the same thing, and Aldrin also refused. Faced with Bart's insistence, Aldrin punched him and left without taking the oath. In the presence of Bart and the Bible, Collins couldn't even formulate a question and quickly got into his car and drove away. Continuing the discussion, in a time like this, one can't help but notice the quarantine card, which tells of a deliberately planned epidemiological disaster and alludes to many theories that are considered, coincidentally, by the mainstream media, as well as online denialists regarding the ongoing pandemic, which for sure you know. The future foreseen by the game is linked to the Hitler's Brain card, which envisions the rise of new and increasingly radical nationalisms and an inevitable World War III, that Third World War archetype that is always present in the growing struggle between the reality of events and the invisible threads that can be connected among them. But how did the American game designer predict events that have unfolded precisely as described? Among the various explanations proposed, the most convincing one is that the game's creator, Steve Jackson, received confidential information from someone with direct knowledge of the projects circulating within the New World Order framework. It's possible that Jackson was used as an unwitting mouthpiece to disseminate information with the apparent intention of reinforcing the public perception of the power of this ruling class. Alternatively, the author could belong to the Euro-Atlantic liberal order, or they may be someone who is simply trying to commercially exploit certain information they somehow came into possession of. After all, Steve Jackson Games reports an annual gross income of over $2.5 million.